5 Live Formula One with Jenny Gow.
Hello and welcome to Singapore. The sun is shining and thousands of fans have flocked to this Marina Bay street circuit to see racing return to this very special location. The Singapore Flyer, their large version of the Millennium Wheel, if you like, is just to my left circulating and people getting a bird's eye view. So Jackie Stewart with his tartan cap and trousers is just waving to me as he takes a little tour past us in the paddock, and I expect this weekend to be a very busy paddock. Lots of fans here as well because they want to see a little piece of history. There has never been a Formula One world champion crowned here in Singapore. We may be saying there still hasn't been by the end of the weekend because the permutations mean that it's a slim chance. But nevertheless, there is a chance that Max Verstappen could leave here a 2-times world champion. Sun just starting to set. A few clouds in the sky as the intensity of the heat just lessens a little bit, and Jack Nicholls in your commentary box with the air conditioning probably even mid-blast. Tell us about those permutations. Tell us what Max needs to do to leave here as a champion again.
Well, basically, he needs to win the Grand Prix. That's the first part of it. And then Sergio Perez, his teammate, needs to finish 4th or lower, and Charles Leclerc needs to finish 8th or lower. It changes a little bit if you chuck in fastest laps and stuff. But broadly speaking, that's the situation we're in. So it's fairly unlikely, I think, that Verstappen will win the championship. If you were to get, it's more than possible because of, Verstappen's dominance recently, and Leclerc, has retired from 3 Grand Prix this season. So it's possible, but I think more than likely the championship will stumble on towards Japan and Austin before it's wrapped up.
Alongside you is Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic. And Mark, just describe the feeling in the garage on a weekend where you can win the championship. Is it a bit of a game changer?
Well, I think if you let it become a game changer, that becomes the problem. That's when problems start creeping in, because the reality is you've got to do everything the same way you've been doing it all season. Nothing actually changes. It's all about getting the best out of your team and your car for this weekend. So the smart money is on the people that do the things the same. Max Verstappen has got himself into this position alongside his team Red Bull by doing a lot of things very well. He just has to do that again.
It is incredible just how well they've been doing. If you look at it, Max Verstappen, 5 race wins on the trot. He's looking for all kinds of records this season. And I think, Mark, he's driven fairly faultlessly all year. Is that your assessment?
Yes, I'd say more or less. There's been the occasional mistake creeping in, but not very many. And this is the mark of a great champion, isn't it? It's about being consistent with your performances, and it's not just Max, of course. It's his team as well. If you look at the teams that might have put up a challenge to Red Bull this year, they've all faltered. It's not to take anything away from Red Bull, but Ferrari have made mistakes, many mistakes operationally. Mercedes have got a car that's not capable of challenging to the same level. So they haven't had the competition that we've seen in previous years, or certainly last year. Red Bull versus Mercedes was so tight all the way through. That hasn't been the case this year, but you can't take anything away from Max and the team. They have done an absolutely wonderful job.
They certainly have. I'm sure when we get into the session, Mark, we'll talk a little bit more about your experiences with McLaren, especially back in 2008 and Brazil, because that was another championship on the line, and it went down to the wire, and it must have been an incredibly stressful weekend environment. And I expect, Jack, that this weekend will be less stressful because we know that there are still so many rounds to go, so many possibilities for Max to, seal up what is the inevitable win now.
Yeah, exactly. Verstappen could, he could almost miss the last few races of the season and still win the championship, whatever happens. So I think that there's not going to be a huge amount of pressure coming into this weekend, or even next weekend, or the weekend after. Certainly nothing like I don't even know how to describe that weekend in Abu Dhabi last year, but the feeling and I still don't know how to describe it. It was just remarkable, and this is nothing like that. It's all very calm and casual, and if they come in and they win the race and win the championship, then cool. But if not, we'll do it next weekend, it's all chill, Jen. It's all chill.
Yeah, 2 Asian races in a row. This one, Singapore, of course, and then we go on to Japan for next weekend. They come thick and fast now with America, Mexico, Brazil and Abu Dhabi rounding out the season. And there's still plenty to fight for as Nick de Vries in his Mercedes top just walks past me. He's on standby. Alex Albon is fit to go out there and see what he can do today, hopefully, after suffering from respiratory failure after his operation for appendicitis. He's feeling like he's recovered. Incredible, really, quite remarkable. Right, green at the end of the pit lane. Let's hand over and get this session, free practice 1, underway.
Huge cheers from the crowd, weren't there, as Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas joined the circuit in their Alfa Romeos, and they're hoping for a bit of a better performance this weekend than they have had on other high downforce circuits this season. Valtteri Bottas saying they learned a lot from Monaco and from Baku and hope to be back towards the points, because Bottas actually hasn't scored points since 7th place in Canada. So it's been quite a while since Bottas scored any points. There was a nice little fact I read. Actually, this is boring, but an Alfa Romeo, Giovinazzi, led the Grand Prix for 4 laps back in 2019, and that was the first time that Alfa Romeo had led a lap since Andrea de Cesaris at the 1983 Belgian Grand Prix.
Wow, that is a good fact,
isn't it? I'm glad you backed me up on that. So as Jenny said, it's just gone 6 o'clock in Singapore, and so the sun is still there. It's beginning to set now, and you can see the spectacular surroundings. I always partially think that I prefer Singapore in the daytime, because you actually get to see the buildings and you get to see the fact that it's a street circuit. At night it all just becomes dark and blurry, but I quite like it in the day. But anyway,
see, I disagree. I prefer it at night. And look, this was the original night race, wasn't it, for Formula One? And I think it was so spectacular. I still think it's spectacular underneath the floodlights. I think it just gives us a very different environment, a very different setting for a Formula One Grand Prix. And I think that's what this calendar, and the calendar's moving forward. We just had the 2023 calendar announced. Perhaps we'll talk about that a bit later on. But I think we should have variety on a Formula One calendar in terms of different types of circuit, different types of environment, different challenges for teams and drivers, and I think the night race under those floodlights gives us exactly that.
Everybody quite keen to get straight out on circuit. It's a little bit of an unrepresentative session. Track temperature, though, is only at 37.2 degrees at the moment, so it's not exactly roasting, the track temperature. Here's Leclerc's radio.
He's Albon brakes. Stand by, we'll come back to you. So for us, it looks fine. Just try.
So something about the brake
check.
I think there's something wrong.
Okay, so Leclerc complaining about the brakes. As I was saying, it's not... When you go to Bahrain and free practice 1, the track temperature's up at like 60 degrees or something, whereas here it's at 37, so it's not actually too bad and too unrepresentative. And only the Aston Martins, the Williams of Albon and the Mercedes of George Russell are in the pits at the moment, so everybody cracking on.
Yeah, well, the reason is that, unlike Bahrain, I guess, on a circuit like this, a street circuit in Singapore, it's not just about having representative conditions, it's about getting the driver into the groove around this circuit. It's one of those tracks where there is no room for mistakes. You know, if you go off, you're basically in a wall and your session's over. So the driver has to gradually build up to his peak level of performance, hopefully finding that peak level, you know, when it comes to Saturday afternoon for qualifying. But it starts right now, so getting the drivers on track, getting some laps under their belts is more important here perhaps than some other circuits.
Yeah, and the Aston Martins have now left the pit lane with Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll. Albon and Russell, the only two times in the only two drivers in the pit lane. Leclerc is returning to the pit lane now in the Ferrari, so that suggests that whatever problem he thought they had and the Ferrari team thought looked fine, maybe a little bit of a concern, or they may have just scrubbed. No, he's going back into the garage, isn't he? That was just a little practice pit stop. So Leclerc is going straight back in the garage after an install lap, basically. Everybody else is carrying on.
Well, you know, I said about this session being really important to get the driver into that groove, and that's about building confidence. And if you've got even the slightest issue, even if you as a driver perceive there to be an issue, that hampers your confidence, that holds you back, and that's a massive part of any lap time you're going to get around here. So he's got to be happy, he's got to have confidence in his car, and if that means coming back to the pits to get it checked over, then that's what he has to do.
So Verstappen out on circuit. Carlos Sainz has done a 1 minute 50.961, and Verstappen is out there now, going quicker than Sainz at the moment. Verstappen is out on a set of the medium tyres, yellow on the sidewall of that Red Bull, as he comes into the sort of second half of the lap, coming through the right at turn 16, the left at 17, and then down towards the left-hander of turn 18 that takes him 90 degrees underneath the grandstand, then pokes out the other side and through the final complex of corners at 20 and 21, and then through the final 2 turns on this very long, very twisty circuit. One of the longest races, I think the longest race in terms of time on the calendar, and Verstappen does a 1 minute 47.3, so 3 and a bit seconds quicker than Carlos Sainz straight away. Verstappen on the medium tyre, 2.4 seconds quicker than anyone else, but still the very early stages. But we see this so often with Verstappen, where he's just 4 seconds quicker than anyone straight out of the blocks, isn't he?
Yeah. It was really interesting hearing, I think it was George Russell in his pre-weekend interviews coming into the weekend, talking about how he'll know within 2 or 3 laps in that Mercedes, 2 or 3 laps, and he'll know how his weekend's going to go to some extent. He's going to know if the car suits the circuit or not. He was talking about last time out, or maybe I think he was talking about Zandvoort, and he said within the first 3 laps, you know, him and Lewis Hamilton knew exactly that their car was going to be switched on, and that gave them a real good, clear indication of how much performance they'd have over a weekend. So within these first few laps here, you'd expect them to know the same sort of thing, and it'll be the same for all drivers. You get a real clear feeling. Same from the team perspective. You get that first batch of data coming back from the car very, very early on. You know if you're in the ballpark or not, and that's important, because if you are in the ballpark out the box, then you're just sort of tweaking and fine-tuning over the rest of the session. It's when you stick the car out on circuit and it's nowhere, that's when you really are back to the drawing board, and you can be into a world of pain this early in the weekend.
Yeah, it's 53 minutes on the clock. Alex Albon is now on circuit. As we mentioned earlier on, he missed the last Grand Prix due to appendicitis, then had respiratory failure in the hospital. He was talking yesterday, and he was basically saying that physically he is fine. It's just a fitness issue, and that's it. He's not in any pain, he's not in anything else. It is just simply a case of a fitness problem for Alex Albon, and not a fitness problem, but you know, fitness is the concern. But he's had almost 2 weeks of training. You never want it to come, but his problems came at the perfect time, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. Yeah, that's right. Well, yes and no. I suppose, yes, he had the extra time to sort of regain that fitness, and he will have been working hard on that. But he's also coming into the toughest race of the season from a physicality point of view. So this will be a test. I'm sure he'll be fine. He was obviously in peak physical condition before he had that problem last time out, and I'm sure it won't take him long to get back up to peak physical condition again.
Stefan says, might be because we haven't been there in a while, but I love Marina Bay and Singapore. Just feels like a special Grand Prix on hashtag BBC F1, and I do agree with that. Kaylee says, ooh, Elvis is here. Elvis is in the building. How often do you get that?
Well, Elvis has left the building is the more common one once I've gone.
Well, that's true. Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, thanks,
save that for next weekend. 51 and a half minutes to go. Alonso's now gone to the top of the times on a 1 minute 47.291, 400ths quicker than Verstappen, 9 tenths quicker than Sergio Perez. Hamilton is 4th fastest at the moment. The top 3, Alonso, Verstappen and Perez, all on the medium tyre, and then Hamilton, Sainz, Bottas are 4th, 5th and 6th, and they're on the hard tyre. Norris is on the mediums, Joe on the mediums as well. Just getting a replay of Alex Albon, just getting a bit of oversteer as he came out of the left-hander of turn 2, where we quite often see a few slides and cars almost glancing the barriers, so the two racing points as they were then wipe each other out in the barriers there a few years ago.
It's one of those when you do get a twitch like Alex Albon just had, a handful of opposite lock to rescue the car. There aren't many places where you can get away with it around here. The walls are so close. It's like a faster version of Monaco. And you know, when I talk about building confidence as a driver, it's having confidence in the car that you can throw it into a corner, you can jump on the brakes, and it's going to do exactly what you expect it to do. Moments like the one that Alex Albon just had, where you've got to massively sort of opposite lock the car to rescue it from being in the wall, do the opposite of start to build confidence, because you go into that corner next time not quite sure what's going to happen. When you put your foot on the throttle coming out the corner, is it going to bite, is it going to grip, or is it going to snap? So building a car that does what you expect it to do over this session and the next one later on today is massively important.
50 minutes on the clock. I haven't done a sync, have I? Sorry. Those of you watching along, 49 minutes and 58, 57, 56, 55 seconds to go. Sergio Perez jumps up into second place, 1.1 seconds slower than Verstappen, so Verstappen found another big old chunk of time on that next lap. Ferrari won too last time we were here in 2019 with Sebastian Vettel and Charles Leclerc, and that was the race where they sort of accidentally undercut Vettel for the win, didn't they? I remember that, because the first half of the race was on, I think, not on 5 Live, and then they were just coming for the second half of the race, and the first half of the race looked like it was going to be really, really dull, and then as soon as 5 Live joined us, it all kind of kicked off and got quite interesting and fun.
It has the ability to do this race, doesn't it? Whether it's the weather changing or a safety car incident, when we talk about the barriers being so close, if there's an accident...
spin for Nelson Piquet.
Yeah, anything can happen. When something happens, there's a high chance that you're going to get the race either neutralised with a safety car or a virtual safety car. Even red flag situations, relatively common here. So you can flip a race on its head in a moment at any point during this weekend. So keep an eye on it.
A yellow flag in the middle sector, so we'll keep an eye on that one. Leclerc is still in the pits, by the way, and got out of the car when he came back in, and it's Russell. George Russell has just had a moment, and that is going to be... I think that's going to be down at about turn 14, but I've really struggled to find my way around this circuit. It's a real mind bender.
Well, I also think it's very different. It's daylight now as opposed to being under the floodlights the rest of the weekend, and it does change the way that everything looks. So I agree, it's a hard one to get reference points at this stage. We're seeing a replay now of George Russell. So
it was into Singapore. It was the Singapore sling.
So he goes into turn 5, just didn't get the car slowed down. Then he actually nudged the barrier with his front wing, very gentle, won't do any damage, managed to reverse it out, and on he goes. But not a great start for George Russell.
Yeah, 11 and 12 was where he ended up in the wall there, George Russell, just before the Anderson Bridge. Anyway, Jenny Gow.
Yes, weather. I just wanted to bring people up to date because we still have a slightly higher percentage of rain forecast for this Sunday than usual. 60%, say the FIA, with some storms around, but it's generally tended to rain early on in the day, pretty much every day since the teams have been here for setup, and then it kind of goes away by the time any action would happen. So let's see what happens. But rain 2017, I think, was the last time we had any rain really during a race here in Formula One. But safety cars do come aplenty. 3 last time that we were here in 2019. I think there's been a safety car in every single race that we've had here in Singapore. So the chances are quite high. I think there have been 12 races so far, 21 safety car appearances. It's a good stat.
Sounds like a Formula E stat, that one does. Less than 47 minutes to go. Yeah, so and that's what Mark was alluding to earlier, I guess, is that something always happens somewhere, and whether you and you kind of spend, it's kind of like a NASCAR race, where you're watching it waiting for the big one.
Yeah.
It's like here you're watching waiting for the safety car, and whether it's still going to the barriers in a Sauber or something, or just under the bridge, or something can happen anywhere around this circuit, so you're always sort of on the edge of your seat. Verstappen's improving again at the moment. He did a 45.4 previously on his medium tyre. He's just coming underneath the grandstand at 18 and 19, now underneath the flyover and into the final couple of corners at turns 22 and 23, out across the line, and Verstappen improves again, finds another 0.7 of a second to do a 1 minute 44.748, 1.8 seconds quicker than Sergio Perez. Sainz is still third, 1.9 seconds back, still in the pits, Charles Leclerc. So really not the start of the session he would have wanted.
No, not at all. And when we talk about safety cars, as Jenny was talking earlier there, this obviously it's a challenge for the drivers, but it's a massive challenge for the teams to react when that race gets flipped on its head because of an incident. The teams have to be ready, they have to be prepared, they have to be able to make snap decisions that might go completely against what the original race plan was. And here's George Russell.
I went in straight on, there's nothing wrong with the steering or anything like that.
Yeah, so that's just George confirming that we don't think there was any major damage when he nudged the barriers earlier on. But yeah, the teams have to be reactive on a race like this. It keeps you on the edge of your toes as a team member, as a strategist, members of the pit wall. And, we've seen Ferrari over the course of this season struggle to do that on a number of occasions. Operationally, they haven't been as slick, let's say, as some of the other teams. Certainly not in terms of the way we've seen at Red Bull further down the pit lane. So this will be a big test for drivers physically, for team members physically, maintaining hydration, staying on top of things from a physical point of view. But from a mental capacity, from an operational standpoint, it's also a huge challenge for the teams here as well.
44 and a half minutes to go. We saw that with Ferrari, didn't we, in Zandvoort, where they pitted Carlos Sainz, but the call was made too late, so they didn't have the tyres ready. Do you ever not have the tyres ready at McLaren? Do you ever have any shockers like that? Here's Norris's radio, speaking of McLaren.
Just a lot of bouncing for me. Both in the straight line and there's some braking zones.
A lot of bouncing for Norris, which is something that Mercedes were unsure of how their car would be. Hamilton talking yesterday, saying with all the bumps and stuff, not sure whether it'll be good or bad for us. But yeah, did you ever forget the tyres?
2001 British Grand Prix, before the days of encrypted military-grade radio systems.
Yeah.
Our radio was interfered with by a local Northamptonshire taxi firm. This is no joke. David Coulthard was getting messages about collections from Domino's Pizza whilst we're trying to call him in from for pit stops, and on more than one occasion he turned up in the box where we weren't expecting him because we hadn't actually called him in. It was a taxi firm on the radio. It was a disaster, mate. We had about 7 pit stops. About 4 of them we were ready for.
That was in the race?
It was in the race, yeah. It's 2001 or 2002.
That's remarkable. That's remarkable. It's Coulthard turning up with a mighty meaty. Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know, that was an absolutely inappropriate choice of phrasing, considering it's Coulthard, wasn't it? Right, Verstappen is quickest at the moment on 1 minute 44.748. Sergio Perez second quickest, Fernando Alonso third, Sainz fourth, Norris in fifth, Ocon, Gasly, Stroll, Ricciardo and Vettel are the top 10 at the moment. Joe, Hamilton, Bottas, Tsunoda and Albon the top 15. Schumacher, Latifi and Russell, the 19 drivers to have set the lap time. Russell is back out on circuit now on the hard tyres in the Mercedes. Leclerc remaining in the pit lane, but Verstappen's margin 1.1 seconds. Leclerc is in the back of the garage. He's still got his helmet on, so he'll be hoping to get back out. All gold, his helmet this weekend, with the word love emblazoned all over it, and a no war logo on the side as well for Leclerc. But that always feels like, when a driver's standing there still with his helmet on, that always feels the equivalent of when you're on the sub bench in football and you jog in front of the manager being like, it's time for me to come on. It's a bit like, guys, look, I'm ready to go, this is your fault here.
Well, he is desperate to get out there, but look, the team will be desperate to get him out there as well. So it's not just that they're not trying and he wants to go out to play. It's going to be a collective effort in that garage to fix whatever the problem is and get him on circuit. For all the reasons that I talked about earlier, collecting data, getting the driver to start building that confidence, and just getting an understanding of where your car sits. We talked just a moment ago about bumps. This is a bumpy circuit. It's a street circuit. It's the streets that you will drive your road car along on any other day of the week. It's got all sorts of challenges from that perspective. And if we talk about Mercedes, one of the things they've struggled with is the bouncing of their car, isn't it? It's dealing with bumpy circuits. So this could be a challenging weekend for them. But already we've seen Russell hit the wall gently. Already they'll be getting an idea of exactly where they stand at this stage.
Jenny.
Yeah, there has been plenty of resurfacing going on at this track ahead of this race. All sorts of parts of the circuit have been updated, so they should be a little bit smoother, she said confidently. And also, just thinking about what you said with Ferrari at the moment, and you talk to fans and people up and down the paddock, is there a worry that Ferrari are getting themselves into a situation where people just don't take them seriously? They're becoming a little bit of the joke team of the paddock?
Well, if you spend any time on Twitter or the internet in general, there's a whole section of the internet dedicated to Ferrari memes right now, because they have become that to some extent, and not perhaps to become a sort of a joke across the the Formula One fraternity, but I think in terms of not having confidence, definitely people are struggling. Even their own drivers are struggling, I think, to have confidence in some of the decisions coming from the pit wall. So it's definitely a problem. It's a problem that's somewhat entrenched in the organisation, I think. It's not a quick fix, and quite honestly, I think that they will be quite keen to get to the end of this season, perhaps have some kind of reset, or go away, get out of the glare of the media, disappear back inside their own doors of their factory and start trying to repair the issues they've got, because I think they're deep-rooted.
Max Verstappen is quickest, Perez is second, Sainz in the Ferrari is currently fifth fastest, and as we are discussing, Charles Leclerc in the pit lane. The sound you can hear is George Russell, who's taking it fairly steady on this lap, comes across the line 4.8 seconds slower than Verstappen on the hard tyre, George Russell. So
you can hear the bouncing, can't you, on the Mercedes? You can hear it bottoming. That sort of pulsing sound that you can hear in the background is the bottom of his car skitting along the ground as it hits the bumps.
Fernando Alonso has just jumped up into second position in the Alpine, and a reminder, you can download the Checker Flag podcast from BBC Sounds or wherever you get your podcasts, and as a little preview of the weekends. Jenny?
W Series. It's taking place this weekend in Singapore for the first time. And I was speaking to Alice Powell just before this session, actually. We were having a chat about what the track's like, and she said it's incredibly slippery. Obviously, it's a street track, but she said the difference between the curbs and the track is incredible. You get traction on the curbs, and then you go back onto the track, and there's just nothing. It's really, really slippery. And she said if we get any sort of rain across the weekend, Lewis Hamilton just brings his Mercedes into the pit box. Theirs is the first pit box that they come into. Of course, the pit box is done in championship order from last season. But yeah, sorry, I digress slightly. But yeah, if we get any sort of rain across this weekend, it's going to be really treacherous out there. A mix of all sorts of sort of debris and detritus from the cars, normal road cars that have been on this track. And remember, we haven't raced here for 3 years, so very green, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a proper street circuit, this. We go to a few street circuits that are not really street circuits. You think of, obviously not going to Sochi this season. Baku is kind of a real street circuit, but like Monaco, for example, is super smooth and barely a street circuit in terms of the surface. Jeddah, for example, not really a street circuit, whereas this is quite hardcore street circuit wise.
Oh, it really is. Yeah, it's got and when you get rain, it does introduce obviously the obvious challenge of it being wet and less grip, but because you've got so many painted lines, manhole covers, those things become incredibly treacherous in the wet, and you almost you end up having to take different lines because of that. The drivers will figure that out if we do get any wet weather over the weekend, but you have to avoid certain elements of a corner or braking onto a white line because they just have less grip than the tarmac.
It's very clear the setup change we need to do, guys. What we talked about.
Yeah, also for us it's quite clear, so it's good.
So both Carlos Sainz and the team thinking it's pretty clear the setup change they need to make, and they discussed it yesterday. The team agree, so at least they're on the same page. Charles Leclerc is back out on circuit now, so with 37 minutes to go, just under, Leclerc is finally going to get a little bit of running in, but he won't get much in before he's got to change his tyres and head on to his second set. So a bit of lost running for Leclerc. Not a disaster, but he's lost a bit.
Well, better to have those issues now than later in the weekend when things really get serious. There is a positive from what you just heard on Carlos Sainz's radio there. It might sound like that's a real problem in that they've got to go to an immediate setup change, but the fact that they have already talked about it, they've got a plan in place, and they now know, having done a few laps, that perhaps the way they've gone is the wrong decision, but they know what the right decision should be. So there's a positive there, I would say, that they can immediately go to the sort of plan B. And quite often you have this in the engineering meetings before a race weekend or before a session. There can be two potential options. Sometimes there can be more, and you have to at some point plump for one of those, but you have the other one on the back burner in case that doesn't work out, and that looks like that's what's happened here.
Hashtag BBC F1 or f1@bbc.co.uk if you want to get in touch. Graham's emailed in. Too much of a good thing? ? Thoughts on 24 rounds next year and 6 sprints? for 2023?
Depends which way you look at it. And actually, I'd be interested to know what people think. So do let us know on hashtag BBCF1. But is there a maximum number of races from a fan's point of view that becomes a problem? Like, can people commit to watching a full Grand Prix or a full, Formula One weekend on a weekend when they might have family commitments? Can you do that on 24, 25, 26 weekends a year? Or do as a fan, do you just want as many as possible because you love it? I think there's going to be a tipping point. I mean, obviously from a team perspective and a driver perspective, the people that work in the media, that's a very different challenge because you are away from home, you are working on all of those weekends. It's a massive commitment away from friends and family and a life back home. We all sign up to it because we love it, but there comes a point when it's that can take so much of a personal toll. I mean, Formula One is an industry littered with divorcees, and it is because of this. It's because you're never there when you're part of this experience. So I never wanted to complain about when I was working for the team. I never, ever complained about it because I loved my job. But I couldn't also do it forever because, that takes over your entire life.
I found the key is not to have any friends.
Yes, that's right.
It's a lot easier, personally.
Well, that's the way it ends up anyway if you spend too long in Formula One. All your friends are in that paddock.
34 minutes and 10 seconds to go. Yeah, do let us know. I think, for me, the interesting thing, it depends who you're talking to. Like, the people, you guys listening now, look, you're listening to Formula One practice on the BBC Sport website. You're keen. And Sports Extra. But you're keen, right? You're into this. So 24 weekends of FP1, FP2, FP3, quali, race. That's a big, big chunk. And I wonder if it's different for our listeners as opposed to your casual listener who does just watch 90 minutes on a Sunday in the same way they watch 90 minutes of football on a Saturday, 38 weekends a year. I wonder if there's a difference there.
Well, I'm sure there is, and that's a good point. Everybody consumes Formula One in different ways. Some people, I'm sure, will watch just a highlights package on some weekends. Others will follow every single lap from now until Sunday evening. So everybody takes something different from it, and I guess we'll all have different opinions on it. But I think it's, from a Formula One business perspective, we all know why they want more races. More races means the sport can grow, it can go to new territories, and ultimately it will bring in more money. And it is a business. They've invested a huge amount of money in buying this sport and now developing and growing the sport. They've got to get a return on that. So you can understand that. But they're also asking more and more from everybody involved, and I include the fans in that, to get that more, increased revenue stream coming in.
Jenny Gow.
Yeah, so just come down to Charles Leclerc's garage. He is obviously still not in there. On the other side of the garage, Carlos Sainz is there. They're just taking the front wing off Sainz's car, actually. Spoken to the team, Ferrari say they did an extra brake check on Charles's car brake system. And now he is out and, as you say, circulating. Those setup changes that you heard Carlos Sainz talking about are being carried out. Some of the bodywork on the rear left has come off and they're just kind of tweaking around in that area. They've got their little torches out, having a good look at that car as well. Ferrari could go very well around here this weekend. Could being the operative word.
Antonio Giovinazzi's had a haircut. I don't know when that happened. I think that must have been post Zandvoort, but
I didn't recognise him there when we saw those images.
His lovely locks are just a little shorter. For old Gio. Andrew Benson, the BBC's chief F1 writer, is in the media centre and has written a story on the BBC Formula One website. Andrew, would you like to tell us about it? We would like you to tell us about it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, there's well, thank you, Jack. It's actually a story that's been bubbling around in the background in Formula One for a number of months, but and it's about the budget cap, which is a limit on spending for all teams. Two organisations, Gazzetta dello Sport and Automotive Sport, have both reported this morning that, or I should say this morning, it's not this morning in Singapore anymore, that Red Bull and Aston Martin are going to be found in breach of the cost cap last year. Red Bull describe it as purely speculation. Aston Martin have just said they're awaiting their compliance certification. Now, purely speculation, which is the Red Bull quote, sounds to a lot of people here like what we call in the media a non-denial denial, i.e. an acceptance that the story's true, but they just don't want to talk about it yet. Certainly that's what everyone expects. And obviously the ramifications of this are what happens next. Will the FIA actually find them in breach, as most of the other teams in the paddock think that they were? And what do they do about it? There are two levels of breach, minor and material. The potential punishments for both are very similar, with the exception that points deductions, potentially reductions on future research and development or future budget cap allowance. And then for a material breach, the sort of nuclear option is a team can be excluded from the championship. Now, we should say first of all, that there's no expectation within Formula One, even though everyone believes this story is true, that Red Bull, the result of last year's championship will be changed. Teams do want to see some proper action from the FIA. Angus Seidel, the McLaren team principal, this morning was telling me that the integrity of the championship is at stake when it comes to the budget cap regulations, just as it is for the technical and sporting regulations. And of course, if a team overspent in 2021, they're likely to have used the same financial methodology to set their budget for this year, which means they may well have overspent this year too. And of course, that will also have an impact on their 2023 car development.
Is there
quite
any
a big deal, basically?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there any sort of, because there's I don't quite know how to say this without being dramatic, but do we know the level of sort of intentionality behind it? Right,
it's dramatic, Jack. It's a dramatic story.
Yeah, but I can accidentally overspend on my budget for a week because I ordered DC's Mighty Meaty, and you kind of lose track of it a bit, or you intentionally overspend in order to gain an advantage, because surely there's a difference there, right?
Of course there will be a difference. Now, of course, and we don't know the answer to your question. I think a lot of people in Formula One would say that Red Bull's, it's the fundamental modus operandi of all teams to push all rules to the limit. That's how you get the most performance. But even Red Bull's rivals think that Red Bull take that to an extreme that they would never. So whether you term that as intentional or just what you're supposed to do in Formula One is a different question. And then, of course, I think there's also a question of how well worded are the regulations? Is there wriggle room? Is there debate about what their meaning is? I'm hearing, for example, that Red Bull and the FIA have been going backwards and forwards months. I've not been able to write about it until today because there was just no evidence. But the fact that the two prospective organisations have decided to write something has it's just sort of brought everything a bit more out into the open than before, when it was sort of behind the scenes. So we can't answer that question as to intent. But certainly one thing that people should bear in mind is that the teams were told in a letter from the FIA this week that October the 5th was the date that they would all be given or not their compliance certificates for last season. So that's next Wednesday, so between this weekend and the next weekend in Japan. So we'll see what happens on Wednesday.
Interesting. Thank you, Andrew. And as I say, you can read all of that about that on the BBC F1 website, bbc.co.uk/F1. Jenny Gow?
Yeah, the FIA issued a statement just in response to that story bubbling around the paddock, saying the FIA is currently finalising the assessment of the 2021 financial data submitted by all Formula One teams. Alleged breaches of the financial regulations, if any, will be dealt with according to the formal process set out in the regulations. So that's their stance at the minute.
This is one of those things that, when at the end of a Grand Prix, we hate it when the result is sort of delayed or confused by a post-race investigation. This is like an extreme version of that. We are 2/3 of the way through the following season, and only now are we starting to learn that potentially somebody might have broken the rules last season. I know I don't want to be dramatic like you said, but doesn't it bring into question results? Doesn't it sort of question confidence in these things? I think this was always going to happen. The budget cap, those financial regulations are a relatively new thing for Formula One. People are still getting to grips on how to deal with it and how to police it. But this is kind of not what Formula One needs right now. I don't know how you make it a swifter operation, how you get a decision on these things in real time. Maybe you can't, but it does add an element of I think, muddiness to the waters of Formula One, which I think we really could do without.
Jenny?
Yeah, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari just heading out back on track after those set-up changes that he was describing, the ones that he needed. Sergio Perez, a brand new set of the soft rubber tyres going out as well in the Red Bull as a little tear-off strip just flutters down in the pit lane, and just before him was Esteban Ocon, also on the soft tyres for Alpine. So it's going to be that time of day when, even though it's not really representative running, it's kind of representative running as much as they can get.
Yeah, and we can represent them to each other, can't we? A few hashtag BBC F1s coming in. Carrie says, no, I don't have enough time to watch all the coverage with the 2023 calendar and fulfill my adult responsibilities. Amit says, I think 24 race weekends are too much. As much as I enjoy watching F1, sometimes it's good to have a break. So yeah, interesting. And not many yet saying, yes, more F1. So yeah, interesting. Sam says, I think there are now far too many F1 races, too much of a good thing and not sustainable. I've definitely stopped watching as much of the F1 as I used to.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because you could saturate the sort of market with too much, and then, you know, in like those few responses you're reading out there, people might start turning off. And if you're turning off for one or two races, you're then not engrossed in the championship in the same way that you might be if you're zoned in on them all. So I think it's an interesting one.
What's going on with this torque overrun into turn 8 and 9? Do you see it?
If we can see something going on there, suggesting to lock more in there.
It's not diff.
So that's an interesting conversation between George Russell and his engineer. He's talking about a torque overrun, and kind of what he means by that is as he comes off the accelerator, as he gets onto the brakes going into a corner, the engine's still delivering some torque. It's still sort of pushing the car on, when at that point he needs it to be either coasting or starting to use engine braking to slow down. So that is a really unsettling feeling for a driver. Easy one, in theory, at least to fix, because these are settings that you can tweak continuously from the steering wheel when you get back into the garage as well, but certainly something to look at for the team there.
So Verstappen's on a outlap now on a new set of soft tyres. Stroll is on a set of mediums, and he's gone second quickest. Oh, big moment there for Carlos Sainz. Goodness me, that was quite a twitch, and he's now backed off, and that was coming out of turn 5 and heading down that back stretch. He's quickest so far, a 1:44.2. He's just put a new set of soft tyres on, so might be able to find a bit more speed as well. Troubles for Ferrari's Charles Leclerc. He missed the first 25 minutes of running due to a brake problem, seemingly, so he's got a bit of catch-up to do. But Verstappen quickest at the moment. Full commentary on Sports Extra. I had a moment, was Carlos Sainz's message on the radio.
He certainly did have a moment. I'm not surprised he backed off. Probably less to do with losing his lap time, more because he was terrified. He had a massive moment. It looked like understeer, then snapped into oversteer, and he just about managed to keep it out the wall. But as I said earlier, you're so close to the barriers and to the walls, and they are proper hard concrete walls here, that can be scary stuff. But he goes on to fight another day.
Second Lesmo says, I stopped watching The Bill when it went from 2 to 3 episodes per week.
It's a great analogy.
22 minutes on the clock. Sergio Perez is on a quick lap here, looking to go to the top of the times. He's on the soft tyres, but Verstappen, his teammate, has just gone 2 tenths quicker than him in the first sector. Perez coming up to the final couple of corners. Mercedes of George Russell is in 9th place, Hamilton's in 17th, so both Mercedes in the pits. Ocon jumps up into second on the soft tyres. Perez, though, goes to the top, a 1:43.839. Verstappen is coming through the middle sector now, through the right-hander that takes him then out over the Anderson Bridge, and a hit on the left rear, I think, for Sebastian Vettel here. Sebastian Vettel has got damage to the left rear of his car. I imagine he did what Sainz did. Sorry, it's Stroll, my apologies. Stroll, I think he's done what Sainz has done, but actually hit the wall, and now he's limping around. and Verstappen might not get to the end of this. Well, we'll see whether Stroll can make it back to the pits or not, actually.
Yeah, Verstappen just went past the sort of stricken car of Sebastian Vettel, but it looked like the yellow flags just came out after he went past, I think. Verstappen was half a second up on his teammate Perez at that point, so it's looking like a very quick lap, and he's still on it. He's still purple in all the sectors so far, so as he comes through turns 22 and 23, the final part of the lap, we'll get a reading here, but it's going to be a quick one.
So Verstappen across the line, and it's a 43.1, which is 7/10 quicker than Sergio Perez. So Verstappen quickest, Perez second, Ocon third, but Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin has clipped the wall, and we'll see what he ends up doing. Jenny?
Yeah, just waiting for him to come in, actually. His mechanics are just preparing the pit bay.
He won't be coming in, I don't think, because there's a red flag now. So I presume he's stopped somewhere.
Yeah, meanwhile, Fernando Alonso out of the car at the moment, of his Alpine. And I feel like, he's sat cross-legged on the workbench right at the back of the garage, looking a little bit, I don't know, like a naughty nymph. It's brilliant. But the car, the floor just coming off now. I'm just looking to see if there's any fluid down there, maybe a little bit of fluid down there. Either way, some work going on for Fernando, and they're taking the floor off now with, 20 minutes to go. I'd be very doubtful if they can get him out in time again. Let's see. Game on, challenge on for Alpine. The red flag will help them because they won't miss out on quite so much running.
Stroll just got really wide in turn 5, didn't he?
Yeah, it was Stroll, sir. I think I said Vettel, it was Stroll.
Well, I said Vettel first, and that's why you copied me.
Yeah, he did. He went in too quickly, I think, is the simple answer. Here we go. We'll see a slow-mo replay. Went in too quickly. And actually, just a tiniest bit of oversteer, really. He looked like he'd almost got the corner right, but he just went wide, clipped the left rear, and it's hard enough to break his car.
Hit the wall.
So stop the car, go straight and stop the car, go straight and stop the car.
That was the communication with Stroll and his engineer. I do miss Brad, but he's pulled over at the side of the circuit. So with 18 minutes and 51 seconds on the clock, they're going to remove that Lance Stroll car. So hopefully, it looks like they can just push it out of the way, so that shouldn't be too bad. The order is Verstappen, Perez, Ocon. Those are the only 3 drivers that have done a lap on the soft tyres. Stroll, Alonso, Vettel, Sainz, Ricciardo, Bottas and Russell were the rest of the top 10. Magnussen, Tsunoda, Albon, Leclerc and Zhou the top 15. Schumacher, Hamilton, Norris, Latifi, the 20 drivers. Hamilton had gone out, he'd just gone out on a new set of softs. Russell was yet to leave the pit lane. So, as I say, Verstappen, Perez and Ocon were the only 3 at the front who had done a lap on a soft tyre, because Sainz had just gone out. I think Ricciardo, Tsunoda had just done a lap on the softs, but of the front runners, that was sort of it.
Am I right in thinking it's Fernando Alonso's 350th race this weekend, or have I made that up? Because if it is, that is an astronomical number of Grand Prix, isn't it? I'll let you fact check that. I may well have made it up, but
Alonso Wiki. Jenny,
he's been around a while.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So he equaled 349 last time out. That's a record set by Kimi Raikkonen, your old mucker.
Yeah.
Mark, not Jack. We know Jack doesn't have friends, so that's fine. And this weekend will be his. You said it. You literally said it on the radio. I'm just saying what you said.
I thought you might be one of them. I thought you might come on the radio and say, "Oh no, I'm your friend."
Hey, I've always got your back, Team Radio.
Drivability is really poor.
That's Hamilton's radio. Do carry on, Jenny.
Drivability really poor, I think he said. Yes, this weekend will be due to be his 350th start in Formula One, making him the person who has started the most amount of Formula One races ever, overtaking Kimi Raikkonen by 1. And as he clocks up more and more races, and as he goes across to Aston Martin next year and clocks up even more, he will set the gold standard. But I think Hamilton, I want to say 308. Might not have that spot on, but something in the region of at the moment.
It's a huge number of races, Fernando. You got to take your hat off, because he's still performing. I think. I don't think we can say he's deteriorating at an alarming rate. He's still seemingly hungry for it. He's moving to a new team and a new challenge. He seems to be sort of invigorated by that, and I think his performances are still top notch.
Couldn't agree more. Esteban Ocon, in fact, didn't he come out in the last race and say, only Hamilton's been closer to Alonso than I am, or something like that? I think
he did say something along those lines. Yeah.
So we have got someone here. Gareth says on hashtag BBCF1, have not missed a single session since the beginning of last season. Bring on 24 races, I say. Brings the championship alive a bit more. So we do have some opposite views or different views.
Yeah, it will be a mixed bag, as we said, and I think it's going to be a sort of balancing act, pushing it further and further just to see how far they can take it before there's a big enough kickback for it to sort of outweigh the benefits, the financial benefits of adding more Grand Prix. But on the plus side, it brings the sport to new markets, new territories, to a bigger audience potentially.
Formula One's going to Newmarket. That's breaking news.
Well, look, there are merits to it. There's a lot of pluses. There's a lot of pluses to it, but there will be negatives from lots of people too. So they've got to navigate that carefully. I think the sort of commercial rights holder as they move forward.
Ambient Sheep said that they stopped watching the bill when it went to 3 a week as well. So There you go. Let that be a lesson to you. Jenny.
Just looking down at Charles Leclerc's Ferrari, bodywork off, rear left and rear right is actually where they're doing some work. His teammate Carlos Sainz has already gone back out on track. We have got a green light there now as Lewis Hamilton also makes his way out, bumping around just in the pit lane. That car looks a handful. Really doesn't look very kind to its drivers.
My boss Steve has just texted saying, I'll be your friend, Jack. I'm all right.
There you go. Life's good.
14 and a half minutes to go. Car's back on track, and Carlos Sainz is back out there. So is Tsunoda. So is Hamilton, and he's just left the pits. In fact, Lewis Hamilton. Jenny, more on Alonso.
Yeah, sorry, just to update you, the Naughty Nymph is at the back of the garage. As a precaution, the team have taken the floor off. They're checking a suspected gearbox oil leak. Bearing in mind it looked like there was fluid at the rear right of that car coming out onto the floor. Sounds pretty much conclusive to me, but there we go. Adrian Newey just pouring over Sergio Perez's car with his infamous red A4 spiral-bound notebook. There's a yellow little ticker in there to denote the page that he wants to open, maybe. Fascinated by looking at this Red Bull car. You have to say, he and his team have done all right this year, haven't they?
Just a little bit. It's remarkable. We had an interesting chat about that actually last night on the podcast, and download that if you want to. 13 minutes and 20 seconds left on the clock. Here comes Carlos Sainz then through turn 5, where he had his moment last time. No such troubles this time through. He's now coming up towards the left-hander of turn 7. Through the first sector, he's just under 2 tenths down on Max Verstappen. Comes through the left-hander now of turn 7. The little blast down towards the 90-degree right-hander of turn 8. Then still 90 degrees, but a bit wider and more open, the left-hander of turn 9. Then into what was formerly the Singapore sling, left-hander at turn 10, pretty quick, that keeps looping all the way around before flicking it right at 11, over the Anderson Bridge. Oof, right up to the wall on the exit there. Then into the really, really tight left-hander of turn...
Bit of understeer there.
13, and let's see what he's got after the middle sector here. Carlos Sainz. He is 4 tenths down on Max Verstappen as he comes into the final sector. So Verstappen looking quick still.
Yeah, and it was understeer, I think, that triggered that big moment that you heard him reference on the radio, and he's got it again through the middle part of the lap there. So they've still got some issues to dial out with that Ferrari, but here he comes through the final couple of corners. And we'll get a lap time as he comes under the grandstand towards the end of the lap. It's not going to be one that's going to set the world alight, unfortunately, and they've clearly got some little tweaks they need to make. They can make them, of course, back in the garage. They've got some time in between sessions to dial out things like understeer. But here he comes then. Oh, another massive moment for Carlos Sainz. And again, he just gets away with it. Crosses the line. It's a 1:44.1, but way off. And he lost a lot of time in the final corner there. And that car is nowhere near yet where it needs to be. So they've got work to do at Ferrari.
Charles Leclerc is out on circuit. He's just left the pits on a set of soft tyres, so we'll see whether he can get any closer to Verstappen or have a bit of a tidier lap. Sainz was actually asked yesterday, are you worried about the threat from Mercedes? And he said, well, in the championship, in the fight for second, and he said, well, we're just focused on getting back to winning, and if we do that, then the battle with Mercedes will sort of take care of itself. The more I watched that moment in the final corner, the more he was very close to a huge shunt.
Yeah, it was nearly massive, because that's the one really sort of high-speed corner, if you like, the final corner onto the start-finish straight. And he had that moment at speed. Luckily, there's a little bit of runoff, and we are talking only a little bit, but there is some, and he used every bit of it to stay out the wall there.
Less than 11 minutes to go. Verstappen and Perez have gone back out on the medium tyres. Charles Leclerc is coming through the final sector now. Then he'll wind it up and go for a quick lap. He's got one of the McLarens coming in behind, and that is Norris, but Norris is also on an outlap as well, even though Norris is quite keen to get up to the back of Leclerc.
Well, Norris is two different cars at McLaren this weekend. A big upgrade package, but only on Norris's car, the car that we're seeing at the moment, who is tucked underneath the rear wing of the Ferrari, covered in that Flovis paint, the high-vis paint that gives a visualisation of the airflow around those new components. So the team very keen to get an understanding of this package, whether it's working, if it's working as expected. Daniel Ricciardo, we expect to get that package perhaps next time out in Japan, and that's just a consequence of it being rushed through. They want to bring it to the circuit, but they haven't been able to make enough components to fit on both cars at this stage, and they'd rather get one onto the car, give it a try, get some feedback, get some data on it, and it will confirm whether they're going in the right direction or not.
Leclerc in the Ferrari through the first sector, and he is 2.5 tenths down on Max Verstappen, so a quarter of a second away as he swings through the left-hander now at turn 7, now into 8 and 9, the two 90 rights and 90 lefts. Leclerc has now done 11 laps, so he's only 3 off Verstappen, so because of that red flag, I think that's kind of helped him catch up really a little bit with everybody else. He now comes into the Singapore sling, swings it right and left again over the Anderson Bridge. A little bit of correction and hesitation on the throttle as well, so it doesn't look lovely, this Ferrari.
No, it doesn't. In the hands of both drivers, similar problems, just skittish over the bumps, through the corners and over the curves. It doesn't seem to be handling that well at all. You've got to have quite a lot of compliance in your car for this particular circuit. I mean, a little bit more suspension movement, a little bit more capability to handle those lumps and bumps and the rapid changes of direction. You've got massive amounts of downforce, wings at their highest settings possible, really almost Monaco settings here, and those things are all compromises, because really to go around a racetrack as fast as possible, you want a nice stiff car that maintains its sort of aero platform, keeps it level, but you can't have that around here because you'd never survive over the bump. So finding that balance is what Ferrari got to try and do here.
Leclerc did the fastest middle sector of anyone, but comes through 3 tenths back from Max Verstappen, so that's moderately encouraging, I would suggest, for Charles Leclerc. It's not a game changer in how exciting the fight is on, but it's not too bad. Russell is half a second down meanwhile on Verstappen after the middle sector, so he looks like he's going to be a little bit away from the fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mercedes are in 5th and 6th places this weekend and a little adrift of the leaders and a little ahead of the midfield pack, but we'll wait and see. Russell coming underneath the grandstand now and out into the final sequence of corners, through the right, then the left, and then just the quick left-hander to come. Flashes in front of the commentary boxes on Russell's left-hand side, and then out across the line, and he goes up into 4th place, 9 tenths away ahead of Carlos Sainz, but Sainz made quite clear errors on his lap where he lost time. 7.5 minutes to go.
Yeah, I mean, it is, like you said, it's kind of where Mercedes are, isn't it? They are best of the rest on most occasions this year. No real challenge consistently from behind, probably not close enough to challenge the two big teams in front of them in Red Bull and Ferrari, and they've kind of nestled into that 3rd place as a team, but they still have lots to fight for. They could still finish 2nd in the championship because of their consistency, not because they've got the 2nd best car, but because they've managed to deliver those results consistently all through the season, as we hear Perez with some troubles.
Blocks, coast into the pit lane if you can.
That sounded like a drive shaft going for Perez there, because suddenly it was, like sort of like a slipping clutch almost was the sound, and then the drive went completely.
Yeah, engine's still running, and he was just coming to the end of the lap, so he manages to coast all the way back into the pit, so the team can get their hands on the car. But with 6 minutes to go, that may well see the end of his session. Let's see.
6.5 minutes to go. Laura says, I have accepted that I will not be able to follow a good 50% of F1 races next year. alongside my marshalling responsibilities, it loses some of its appeal when you can't keep track of the intricacies of the World Championship, the beginning of the end. David says, same with Come Dine With Me. Moving from a 1 hour format to 30 minutes daily ruined it. And I think it's true. I preferred Come Dine With Me when it was just 1 hour. You saw everyone in that 1 hour. Spreading it out across the week, you watched it. It was difficult to keep abreast.
There's clear evidence here that Formula One need to take note of. Yeah, it's a good point. Look, you can oversaturate.
What a sad little life.
I know.
That was from Come Dine With Me, wasn't it? Is that the one? I'm sure that's when he goes really angry anyway.
I don't know, I stopped watching when it went to an hour.
Hamilton then on a lap. Russell went fourth quickest. Hamilton actually here could be about to jump to the top of the times. Obviously, track improvement is a big thing, and Hamilton goes quickest.
There's no grip on the second lap. I think they are 1 lap higher.
Sainz saying there's no grip on the second lap, but Hamilton going quickest, a 1 minute 43.033. Now, as I say, track evolution huge in Singapore, so that'll have something to do with it, because it must have been at least 10 minutes ago now that Verstappen set his lap time, but still marginally encouraging for Mercedes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there'll be lots of positives to take from that. I mean, track evolution, you mustn't underestimate it or understate it here. It's enormous, particularly in this session, which is the first that we've had any running, of course, on this circuit. And actually, for 3 years, we haven't had any running with Formula One cars around here. So, yeah, massive change as the session rolls on. The lap times will start to fall, and that will continue again in the later session today.
Verstappen's gone off at turn 16. He's rejoined the circuit now and is back on his way. He's out on the medium tyres, Verstappen. We'll wait and see what happened to him there. He was just coming into the right-hander, heavy braking zone. The track turns... Sorry, this is turn 14. Oh, no, so he's done 14.5. Then on the power down towards turn 16. Gets onto the brakes. Just caught the right front and went straight on, really. Nothing particularly dramatic for Verstappen in the end.
No, he was sort of too late on the brakes, realised he couldn't make the corner, and luckily at that turn there is a little runoff sort of lane you can go down, so he's managed to stay out of trouble, bring it back on the circuit, and on he goes.
Less than 4 minutes to go. Pierre Gasly is improving as he comes through the middle sector. He's done a personal best in Sector 1, has Gasly. Hamilton quickest, Verstappen second, Leclerc third, Perez fourth, Russell fifth, Sainz, Ocon, Stroll, Alonso and Vettel are the top 10. Gasly, Ricciardo, Bottas, Magnussen and Tsunoda the top 15. Albon, Zhou, Schumacher, Norris and Latifi, the 20 drivers. Norris is out on the mediums. He did do a run on the soft tyre, Lando Norris, so not quite sure what went awry for him there. Ricciardo's done 3 laps on the softs too, so it looks like they've both done a soft run, but they're 2.7 seconds away, so I can only presume that they haven't really done a soft run, if you know what I mean. Or maybe they both got done by the red flag and then decided not possibly to go back out again and do a proper lap, potentially. It
could have been that, yeah. I didn't actually see, but I mean, the bigger picture for McLaren has been a slightly disappointing one really this year, hasn't it? They started okay. They had moments in the season that have really looked really positive, and they've been in this kind of battle with Alpine, but in the last few rounds it's Alpine that have really shone in that battle, and I think McLaren have brought upgrades to their car that some occasions they've worked and some haven't, whereas Alpine have brought consistent upgrades that seem to have delivered improvements each time, and they've still brought more upgrades to this circuit as well. So from a team perspective, it's been a bit more of a consistent effort through the season, and that sees the Alpine drivers ahead in the championship.
Dunks says, I'm typically British. When the number of races next year was announced, I thought there were too many. But every weekend there is no race. I mope around, wondering what to do, and look forward to the next Grand Prix. I was really grumpy during the break that's just gone. Sorry to everyone who had to put up with me. So, I like that.
There'll be a lot of people like that as well, I'm sure. Yeah. A minute and a half to go as the lights start to, or the sunlight disappears and the floodlights come on. It's just moving into dusk, I guess, now. And obviously the session that we get later on today, FP2, will be fully floodlit and in the dark. So just starting to creep towards slightly more representative conditions from a driving perspective here.
Hamilton quickest, Verstappen second, Leclerc third, Perez fourth, Russell fifth. don't think we're going to see many improvements in these last couple of minutes, but 4/10 separating Hamilton, Verstappen and Leclerc, fairly close. But we've seen a lot of was it flattering to deceive or something from Mercedes this year. I remember Miami, even back in Miami when Russell went quickest in FP2, I think it was, and everyone was like, Mercedes are back. But they haven't been back at all. I mean, maybe a bit at Zandvoort. So I don't think it's worth reading too much into this, but it's certainly encouraging for Hamilton and the Mercedes team. But Russell a second away that's quite sort of the odd one. We didn't see any major mistakes from Russell in the way that we did with like a Sainz, for example. Sainz 1.1 seconds away, but I think we saw Russell's lap, and I don't remember anything being particularly notably difficult, but Hamilton got it hooked up.
Yeah, that's right. And the challenge on this weekend, perhaps even more so than many others, is that because we talked about so much circuit evolution where the track rubbers in, develops more grip, and the lap times come down, as a team, from an engineering perspective, you're sort of chasing that all weekend. So whatever work you're doing right now, whatever your car setup looks like today, it won't be exactly what you need for Saturday, and then for Sunday you'll need different things. And the changes you make, the preparation that you have coming into the weekend has to take all of that into consideration. You've got to start thinking ahead, you've got to predict how you think the circuit's going to evolve and edge your car gradually in that direction as the checkered flag comes out. So that is it. Time is up in the first practice session, and Lewis Hamilton ends it quickest, a 1:43.033, 800ths quicker than Max Verstappen. 4/10 back to Leclerc in third, 8/10 to Perez in fourth, a second to Russell in fifth, 1.1 to Sainz in sixth. Then it's Ocon in seventh, Stroll in eighth, although I think Stroll's time was on the medium tyres. I think Stroll didn't go out on the... I'm just going to check that. Yeah, Stroll's lap time was on the medium, so that's quite interesting that he's there in 8th place in the Aston Martin, although he did end it in the wall. 9th for Gasly, 10th for Alonso, 11th for Vettel, Ricciardo, Bottas, Magnussen, Tsunoda, the top 15, Albon, Joe, Schumacher, Norris and Latifi, the 20 drivers.
So that is the first practice session done here in Singapore. Great to see the cars going around, and whilst that session started off in daylight, now it's kind of dusk and the lights are shining on the wheel to my left, and it really pops, doesn't it, Jack, when you look down at these cars and the lights are all on, 1,600 of them. It looks great, doesn't it?
It's tremendous, isn't it? Yeah, great circuit, great to be back at I can't remember who it was earlier, but someone earlier on #VB71 said it's just really unique, and I think it still has that sort of uniqueness to it.
Yeah, there are other night races, but this was the first one, and this one just is, it's an absolute treat for us. So, Hamilton ruins Max Verstappen's birthday present. He doesn't go fastest in free practice one. Hamilton does. How much are we reading into this, Mark? Because I know people will look at it and they'll look at the nature and characteristics of this track, a little bit similar to maybe a Hungary, where Mercedes were competitive.
Yeah, there'll be positives to take from Mercedes' perspective, but as we said, the circuit's going to change massively over the weekend. They've got to follow that and track that with their changes to their car and stay on top of it, of course. That's a real challenge. But yes, to be this quick out of the box, it doesn't mean anything right now in terms of lap time, but in terms of being up there with the leaders, on a par with Verstappen, albeit the laps done at different times, I think there's definite positives to take from it.
Surely Verstappen wants more from his birthday than quickest in FP1.
No.
You think that's what he's dreaming of?
He's got a cake, all the candles on it. Is it 26 candles this year? He'll blow them out and he'll be like, let me be fastest in free practice one.
Can you
Maybe
ask him what he got for his
cake?
Ask him what he got for his birthday, Jenny, when you speak to him later.
Yeah.
What do you get world champion?
25. Only 25.
Only 25.
25 today.
Wow. So young, yet so talented. Puts us all to shame. There we go. Who's got work to do? Because to me, looks like Norris is one of those. You discussed him a little bit. Anyone else?
Yeah, definitely both McLarens, I'd say, and Norris particularly, with all the new bits on his car. They've got lots of work to do.
But we reckon they might not have done a run on the soft tyres. We think they might have been sort of red flag affected there. And Ferrari, I think, just look a little smidge adrift at the moment compared to Mercedes and Red Bull.
Yeah, agreed. Their car never looked comfortable in the hands of either driver. Charles Leclerc put in a decent lap, but still 4/10 off the pace at the front. But yeah, I think good to see Alex Albon back and doing okay. He's in 16th, but clearly well ahead of his teammate. But good to see him physically.
That's what we're saying, Mark. Audacious.
Audacious.
I think that was the word that George Russell used to describe his good friend's recovery and return to the paddock. So I'll go with audacious. It's a good one.
That is good. Yeah, and it's a tough physical weekend this from a driving perspective. So a real test for him, but passed the first test, hasn't he, for FP1?
Certainly has. Well, there's plenty more running still to go this weekend. Of course, this is only the first practice session. We'll bring you another practice session. And FP3 tomorrow ahead of qualifying, and then we'll get into the race, which takes place on, of course, Sunday at 1 o'clock in the UK. So you can listen to that on 5 Sports Extra and online. Jack, it's going to get better, isn't it? More representative running later on.
Yeah, FP2 always where we find out a little bit more. And can Mercedes keep this pace up and take the fight to Red Bull? That's going to be the big question.
That will be the question indeed. We shall find out a few more answers a little bit later on. But it's Hamilton fastest here in free practice 1, just leading the birthday boy Max Verstappen. This has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.